Hey guys, Mubarak here of In Penny Stock. Hope you're doing well. In today's video, I want to cover a concept that a lot of you guys have heard about from Warren Buffett, Jack Bogle, all of the true billionaire OG legends of investing, which is the concept of how to find undervalued stocks. Okay? I know I teach here at In Penny Stock a lot about day trading, and that's the concept of being able to do a trade based on, some news shifts or technical analysis, where you're basically looking at the price of the stock chart, right? This is an example of a price chart, and you're using these as indicators to know whether or not you should buy or sell. Okay, and even though that's really important and still a very viable method for OTC markets and pink sheets, you can always still go the traditional method, which is finding great stocks that are still around, right? That are undervalued. Okay, they don't have enough attention. They're not really having much volume traded, and pretty much they're just lying sectors, operating businesses, but every now and then they come back with a strong urgence. And there's certain parts where you can figure out that how you can hold on to something that's in a greater value. So let me tell you what I mean, right? If, for example, hypothetically, you were to be able to invest in a house that you knew that would go up to 100,000 or 150,000, right? Would you buy it at a discount today if you knew that even bare minimums, right? Everything sold, even just the hard cost of that house, just to build it, all of the materials to make that house cost a certain amount. If you bought that stock or that house for less than that, that would be a discount. That would be a special deal, right? And so that's what Warren Buffett and these guys did, is that they used to peruse the stock market, and it was much harder back then, okay? They didn't have all of the information online. So they would actually read the annual reports or the 10Ks of every single stock and try to figure out which stocks, which industries are up and coming, which ones are able to be, utilized for profit purposes. Because if you have a certain stock, right, and the market cap, you can see here, will be how much they're valued at, okay? And again, this doesn't necessarily mean their true valuation. It's sometimes a hypothetical number because it's a simple formula that generates this market cap. It's the price of the stock times how many shares are outstanding, correct? So that'll tell you kind of what the stock is valued at in the sake of, the public markets. But there's an ability and a methodology where you can actually find stocks that are undervalued and be able to hold on to them, because even if, God forbid, everything goes to crap, even if it doesn't work out, there's still a minimum viable profit that you can earn from that stock, right? There's a minimum value that should be placed on the stock. And an interesting concept in the stock market always is that everything will revert back to the mean. So what does that mean? Generally speaking, if you look at a stock, on average, it'll always tend to go back down to its core. So that doesn't mean to go down to zero. That means go down to its average medium trading. So you have your peaks, you have your valleys, but you see this stock especially seems to generally trend around 15 to 20 cents. Okay, so we can expect that, generally speaking, even when sometimes it dips lower, there's a high chance of it going back to the mean, right? And I'm going to separate video, I talk about technical analysis. That's looking at the support and resistance lines of a stock. You can tell based on how people have their orders set up whether or not they should buy or sell that stock, okay? So they're still the same valued stocks. Now, when you come across a stock, there's so much pieces of information that it could look overwhelming. So I want to kind of help break that down for you guys, right? The stock we're going to be looking at is CVLB, Conversion Labs Inc. I haven't purchased these guys or anything, so I don't hold their shares, but I do have access to their management team. So again, this is not investing advice. This is just educational advice on how you can look at stocks and important pieces of the puzzle to understand, which stocks are great. So in certain cases of certain stocks, depending on how you want to trade them, if you do ever want to go long with the stock, right, you want to hold it for a long period of time, that's when you need to know the fundamentals, okay? You need to know what the stock does. So in certain scenarios, like for example CVLB, if we want to do an analysis on how the stock is or what they even do, we'll want to understand more about their company. So we can kind of take a look, CVLB stock. take a look to their website, Conversion Labs. You can see here some information about them, some subsidiaries they have, CVLB stock website. Okay, so this is essentially their website here, and this is how they have information. If you ever see IR, that's investor relations. So that is the part of the company that is responsible for interacting with shareholders and letting them know kind of where the stock market price is and where the company is going, right? So cool concept here. You know, this is similar to if you guys have taken a look at some of the cryptocurrency, you know, investigating Bitcoins that I do. There's always an importance of, if you're looking to trade long term, then you want to understand the fundamentals. So you need to know what exactly this company does. Now, the cool thing is that personally, I've been able to kind of benefit from this, not Conversion Lab specifically, but the concept that they are about, which is essentially modernizing healthcare. And the way they're doing that is through telemedicine. Okay, telemedicine is probably one of the greatest shifts going on, because it's essentially what's happening is you don't have to, you know, go in, wait in a doctor's office, set up an appointment, do all that. You can literally sit in your living room and have a whole diagnosis done by a medical professional over the phone, over your iPhone, over the computer, just on a screen share platform. So I think that's a really cool concept that I've been able to take advantage of for my own checkups. And I feel like people around the world are going to start moving towards that as well, right? So the key thing for any stock before you go and really invest hard into it is understanding the industry that it's in, the marketplace it's in, right? Generally speaking, again, I don't know all the companies out there, but if you're looking at something like, you know, some about fax machines or, you know, some older technology, you don't really feel like it might convert. It might not go the distance because that era is over. Whereas any company that's going into the next round or the next level of future technologies, those are usually the ones that you want to keep your eye on, because they're generally trending, they'll go up. And what I mean by that is, the reason the industry or the trend is so important is because you can, like, it's kind of like a rising tide raises all boats, right? So what that means is, even if the stock itself, even if the company itself, in this case CVLB, is not performing to their top ideals, if the industry of telemedicine gets more and more importance and shares and volume traded, and people are getting involved in the industry and wanting to invest in it, then every stock in that sector is going to go up. And that happens pretty often, okay? So, you know, that is kind of one of the key areas where CVLB has an advantage, because essentially they're taking advantage of that telemedicine technology and they're able to kind of combine that. So in essence, what they're doing is they're doing direct marketing, direct response marketing, right? But for telemedicine, kind of OTC prescription, not OTC in terms of the stock market, but OTC like over-the-counter products and stuff. So very interesting concept. But what you need to understand though is that, okay, finding undervalued stocks, once you understand what that actually does, you have to take a detailed look into their financials, okay? Now, this can either happen through just looking in Google, you get an understanding of what direction they're heading towards. You always want to take a look at the, you know, the prior kind of financials and figure out what direction the stock is moving in, okay? If things are technically downtrending, you have to keep an eye out for that. So, for example, you can see that, okay, they did a good job in revenue, right? Here, what you can sometimes find is if you, let's see if we can find a CVLB 10K annual report. The 10K is an important, very important part of an SEC filing, right? So the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, is the body in the United States that is responsible for the protection, you know, of investors and of watching over public companies to make sure that they're not falsifying information. Okay, and so what a public company, right? Any company that has their shares on the stock market, so Twitter, Facebook, Netflix, Google, all of these big companies, or any company that has shares that you can buy from the stock market, they're required to submit a 10K annual report. And some of these get really, really lengthy, but the cool thing is that, sorry about that, they pretty much go into detail about everything you need to know about the stock. So they tell you the business, the risk factors, the properties, all the legal proceedings, all the disclosures, and they have detailed information on the financials, right? The financial history, how many times they're issuing out stock to different consultants, how many times insider people like the CEO are buying and selling the stock. Okay, you need to read this 10K because the 10K will give you great information about the stock, the industry, the management team, and it's really the entire blueprint of the company. You know, so much information is provided in these reports. And I know you might say, listen, I just want quick stock tips. I don't want to read all this. But you know what? If it was that easy, everyone would be rich. Okay? Your responsibility in order to provide for yourself, your family, if you want to get ahead, if you really want to take advantage of the stock market and being able to profit off of it, you know, the information is out there. It's not even like you have to pay thousands of dollars to get access to this behind the scenes information. All of the information, all of the financials you can see on the screen. I'm just scrolling down. Detailed information about the company's financials, how they're spending their money, but whether they're doing it in operating activities, investing activities, financing activities. Now, I'm a CPA, so yes, I do have an advantage in understanding these. But honestly, if you want to take this seriously, if you want to be a good trader, you have to understand this information. I have videos of it in penny stock. We go into detail about how to review an SEC filing, what parts of the information is important. But the cool thing about the SEC filings, like the annual report, is that they'll tell you, you know, the entire past, the entire history, and then also general projections or fundamentals for you to review. So the really cool part of Conversion Labs, right, the CVLB, is, again, if you want to do this for long term, you know, this wouldn't really be a day trading candidate because it doesn't have the necessary volume, but that could change, you know, as more people get interested and involved in this stock. Volume comes and goes, you know, you have to just keep in a track of where it waves in the stock market. But, you know, the interesting thing is that once you do some research, you're going to see that CVLB, right, their annual revenue for 2019, somewhere around here, is estimated to be close to $12 million, right? So as you saw before here, their market cap is only $8 million, right? So in that fashion, in that sense, as long as they hit their projections, which fortunately you can keep track of on a quarterly basis, right? So as long as they even come close to that or hit that, then they're probably going to be worth more than their 8 million market cap, you see? So that's kind of how Warren Buffett and these guys would go around looking for undervalued stocks, okay? There's a lot of different parts of this and a lot of research you want to do, but the key aspects to take away are the industry, right? Making sure that the trend is good, making sure that the space that they are in is good. The financials, all right? You have to understand the story and you have to make sure that the company's not about to go bankrupt or there's no major lawsuit going on that's about to, you know, put the company hold or stop their operations. And all of that information, you can see this is pretty detailed document and it's very easy. All you have to do is Google 10K annual report and you'll be able to find all the information you need about a stock. In-depth detail about who the CEO is, who the COO is, how much they're being paid, how many shares of stock they have, all of that information. Okay, this is the exact information that the billion-dollar companies use and people like Warren Buffett use to get an advantage. Okay, so, you know, I wanted to give you guys some insight into this. I'm going to be able to actually access their management team and get some questions in regarding their stock. So if you guys do have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment below, or you can always email me at admin, ADMIN, at inpennystock.com. And yeah, if you guys have any other questions, any other stocks you find interesting, you know, leave a comment below. I'd love to, rather than providing just generic advice, I'd love to hear your story, figure out how we can help you out. And yeah, if you have any questions, we're going to be talking more about this, the industry, the space. But hope you guys enjoy, and see you guys next time.